legs have a heaviness right now, but the one on the right is worse. Yeah, they're heavy. It definitely feels like there's not a lot of blood flow. The feet and the ankles, if you were to touch them right now, I would probably feel pain. Like everything down there feels a little dead. And like I said, the right side is worse.
Okay, great.
You're on.
Okay, so just as a quick test, this is core integration, which means that we're going to not only relate his feet to his legs, legs to his pelvis, pelvis to the ribs, etc. So I'm going to first have you just lift your leg up, one leg at a time, slowly, and just get a sense of how much effort it takes. And then lift the other side up. And I think you could even see it on the video that it took a little oomph to get the right leg off. Okay? So that should show up when I move his pelvis. Because when you lift your leg, something has to happen in the pelvis to support lifting the leg. Something has to happen in the ribs. So he's got a direct connection to his right rib. Because when I push his left rib, it's got a little bit of spring. Right rib has no spring. So I'm going to do a very quick thing to change his leg. Let's see how this works. Okay, take a few breaths in. And every time you exhale, relax a little bit more on that rib. And why would I be doing this? What does the rib have to do with the leg? So, integration-wise, now you can see that when I move his arm, his rib moves. Can you see that on the camera? Cool. So this has got a different, I don't know if you can feel that, but that's got a different feel. Okay, so what does that do? So that gives him more jiggle. And just from what I did on the rib, lift your right leg again, just get a sense of if it's at all different. Is that different or the same?
It's the same.
The same. Okay. All right. So if I can move the rib, that means that I can move his spine. And I'm going to go down through this a little quickly. So why are my hands in the position they're in? Each position of my hand has a certain intention. I won't go through all the hand positions, just that I'm trying to get the tissue between the bones and the tissue between my two hands to talk to each other. How do I know they're talking? When I move my far hand, my right hand, I want to feel this hip move. I'm not moving the hip, I'm just sensing whether it does move. So that when he moves his leg, his hip will move. So we know everything's connected to everything else. If we move the top of the pelvis, then I can move the bottom of the pelvis. So it may look like I'm pushing his knee up, but I'm waiting for his knee to move as a result of what his pelvis is doing, and then I'm moving his knee. It's not the movement of the knee that's important. It's the release of all the tissue that is behind the knee, the hamstrings. So now I'm doing the same movement. I'm moving his pelvis from his leg. Cool. So we got ribs to spine to pelvis to thigh. Now I'm at the top of the pelvis, to the top of the lower leg, making a connection, looking across to the other hip, make sure the other hip moves, the other thigh moves. So the quality of the movement is how light. It's not that it can move. I shouldn't need a crowbar to move them, but I should have some connection. So for those people who are into anatomy, this is the outside of the leg. It's also called the fibula. There's the fibula bone, which comes down to the outside of the ankle. And of course, if I move the top of one bone, the bottom of the same bone is going to move. So by doing this movement, this is my movement. What is this doing to his body? His brain is saying, I'm moving one hand and the foot's moving. There's a connection. There's a connection. And connections are reversible. I can move his hip from here. I can move his knee from here. All right. Next stop. We're at the ankle. The ankle, or the bottom of the fibula, meets the talus. So what does the talus do? Just say the top of the foot, if you will. Since the only time you're using this move is this is the move that you use when you're walking, the foot is actually, you're standing on the foot so that it's not moving. So you have to have a joint here. So these bones have to move on top of a somewhat stationary foot. It's moving, but it's not moving. You're not going to be able to do this movement when you're standing on it. You're going to be standing on it and you're going to be walking over it. So you're going to get that kind of a movement while you're walking. So I'm going to communicate that. So Raj is listening in on this, and he's not listening to the words, but hey, that's a different feeling. And it's a little sticky. Because you can see how his foot wants to go in this direction, probably from a lot of sprained ankles. So what I would do if we had more time is I would spend a little time releasing all of this tissue on the inside of his leg so that it could, the restriction wouldn't be there. Oh, even that little bit helped. All right, so next joint down, after you get through the talus. And if I had a model of a foot, you have 5 rays of the foot, numbered 1 through 5, and anatomically it's the second ray, or the second tarsal bone, that is the next in line for this movement. So I'm essentially supporting that talus and saying to Roger, would you walk over that stationary bone? In other words, do you have a connection, and does the tissue let go? Wow, that's pretty good. So I did a minimum of tissue work, but he's getting a little bit more spring. Now, what does this come down to? All movements are reversible. Could I spring the foot, and does that move the hip? It's hard to see through his clothing. I'll put my finger here, and you may see that finger move relative to his foot. So that's the goal. Compare it to the other side, which has none. So I'm looking for this to happen from his foot. And here, it doesn't get through his knee. Okay. So my perception when I lift When I lift his foot up, his leg up, I'm rolling his hip, and you may see his spine get longer by evidence of his head. I'm jiggling his head. This one I'm lifting, the hip isn't turning so much, and you're getting not much movement through his whole body. This is a deader movement. That's true. That's not so much interesting in that direction. So it's the knee turning the pelvis lengthening the back. So I'm doing this and his head is moving. All right, Roger, just lift your leg one at a time again, see if you notice any difference.
Right, it's much easier.
Much easier? Good. All right, so if we ask him to walk, he should have several things. One, if he's like most people, he's going to say, now my left leg is heavy, but it's only relative to a lighter right leg. And he'll also say, I got a little more bounce in my step, because every time I moved his leg, his whole spine moved. So when he was walking, he should have more bounce. That's spiral line all the way to the bottom of the foot from the ribs.